Hello everyone, and welcome to Fresh Master Channel. Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips mean a lot to the future of this channel.
Before that fateful interview, before the spandex and the cape became part of his daily attire, Alex Stevenson was just another face in the crowd, an editor quietly climbing the ranks in the publishing world, blending into the bustling New York backdrop. His life, though ordinary on the surface, was a tapestry woven with threads of both triumph and quiet despair. Long before Glenda's departure triggered his transformation into the city's Superman. I didn't know any of this when my editor dumped the assignment on my lap. To me, it was just another quirky piece to fill space, another eccentric New Yorker to profile. I'd covered bizarre stories before. The pigeon whisperer in Central Park, the woman who claimed her cat could predict the weather, but this? A man running around dressed as Superman? It felt like a bad joke. I rolled my eyes as I flipped through the brief dossier on Alex Stevenson, but something about his story nagged at me even before we met. Maybe it was the way the city buzzed about him, or maybe it was the way my editor's voice softened when she said, "There's more to this guy than meets the eye." Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that this assignment would be different. And I wasn't wrong. When he stepped inside, nothing about him immediately screamed peculiar. He had an approachable face, an easygoing smile, and it was clear he spent time at the gym. But the glaring blue spandex, the bold red cape, and that oversized S stamped across his chest? Yeah, hard to miss. For what felt like the millionth time, I mentally cursed my editor for assigning me this story. She'd called me into her office just a few days prior. "You heard about the guy dressed up like Superman running around town?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Nope," I answered flatly. "Sounds like a lunatic." She gave a little shrug. "Maybe, but the city's buzzing and we think there's a story to dig into. We tracked him down and he's agreed to an interview. Guess who's covering it?" She gave me that you-know-you-are look. "Why do I always get stuck with the crazies?" I groaned, already resigned to my fate. As usual, the bizarre found its way to me. That conversation looped in my head as I stood up to meet him, hoping this wouldn't turn into a complete train wreck. "I'm Ella Finn," I introduced myself, offering my hand. "Alex Stevenson," he replied with a confident handshake. "Good to meet you." We settled into our seats and I pulled out my recorder. "Mind if I record this?" I asked. "Not at all," he said with a nod. I checked the mic to make sure it was working. "This is Elle Finn with the New York Times, sitting down with Alex Stevenson, better known around here as Superman. So, do you actually believe you're the Man of Steel?" He let out a small laugh. "Just Alex is fine. And no, I don't think I'm a superhero." "Then what's with the outfit?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. His demeanor shifted, the smile fading. "Because I got tired of feeling helpless." That threw me for a second. "Sounds like you've been through something," I said softly. "Want to tell me about it?" He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I guess I do." And just like that, his story began to unfold.
The F train reeked of that sticky summer dampness, the kind that clings to your skin. I was relieved when I finally got off at Queens Boulevard, but the second the scorching sun hit me, I almost wished I'd stayed underground. By the time I dragged myself through the door of our apartment, all I could think about was the air conditioning. Glenda usually beat me home, but the place was dark and silent. After cooling down and changing into something dry, I started prepping dinner. I barely had the lettuce out when I heard the front door creak open. "Hey babe, I'm in the kitchen," I called out. "It's so hot, I figured we'd just do salad. That cool with you?" She poked her head in from the living room. "Can we talk first?" "Sure," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. She was curled up on the couch like she was cold, arms crossed tightly over her chest. The look on her face made my stomach twist. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice cautious. She let out a shaky breath. "This is harder than I thought it would be." Now I was really worried. "What's going on?" She inhaled deeply, like she was bracing herself. "I'll just come out with it. I want a divorce." I blinked, trying to process the words. Wait, what? Are you serious? She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm serious, Alex. I'm filing for divorce. It felt surreal, like I'd been dropped into the middle of one of those melodramatic novels I edit, where characters always have some witty response locked and loaded, but I had nothing. Why? I thought we were good. I don't want a divorce. I love you. She shook her head slowly, like I was missing the obvious. No, Alex. Things haven't been good for a long time. Maybe you didn't notice, but I did. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. It's not like you did anything wrong. We just drifted apart. It happens. I opened my mouth to argue, but she cut me off before I could get a word out. Please don't. You won't change my mind. I'm going to start packing. I just sat there, stunned, watching as she got up and walked toward the bedroom. You're really leaving? Can't we at least talk about this? I called after her. She paused in the doorway, her face soft but resolute. I'm staying at a friend's for now. Let's not make this any harder than it already is. Minutes later, she reappeared with a suitcase in hand, like she'd been ready for this moment all along. Glenda, come on. What about counseling? We can fix this. She stepped around me like I wasn't even there. I'm sorry, Alex, there's nothing left to fix. And just like that, she rolled her suitcase out the door, slamming it shut behind her, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. I sank into the couch, numb. In the kinds of books I edit, this is where the main character spirals, wrecks the apartment, drowns in whiskey, maybe hooks up with a stranger. But I didn't do any of that. I just sat there in the dark, trying to wrap my head around what the hell had just happened. We seemed perfect. We met in college, part of the same tight-knit group of friends. We didn't start dating until senior year, after Glenda's boyfriend dumped her for grad school in California. After graduation, I chased my publishing dreams, waiting tables to get by, crammed into a tiny Brooklyn apartment with 5 other guys. Eventually, thanks to a favor from my grandfather, I landed an internship at a publishing house. It paid next to nothing, so I kept slinging plates at night, but at least I had a foot in the door. One random Tuesday, my roommates and I hit a bar in Midtown. We were laughing about something stupid when I looked up, and there she was, Glenda, walking in with 2 friends. I nearly knocked over someone's drink rushing toward her, but halfway there I froze. What if she didn't even remember me? But then she spotted me, and her whole face lit up. Alex, she squealed, wrapping her arms around me like no time had passed. We hugged, and then, out of nowhere, she kissed me. I didn't question it. It felt right. She introduced me to her friends. I dragged them over to meet my roommates. And for a night, it was like college all over again. By the end of the evening, we'd swap numbers. She kissed me again before leaving, this time with a different kind of promise. From that night on, we were inseparable. The relationship burned fast and hot, but sharing a life in near poverty made things complicated. My apartment was chaos. No privacy. Even when I managed to claim a room, someone would barge in. Her place was slightly better, fewer roommates, but still privacy was rare. Despite that, we thrived. We even tossed around the idea of getting a place together, but New York rent made that dream laughable. Then luck hit. There was a shakeup at the publishing house, and suddenly a junior editor position opened up. Somehow I'd impressed the right people, and they offered me the job. The pay was still terrible, but it came with benefits. I quit waiting tables and finally became an editor. A month later, Glenda caught her break. She'd been temping at a big law firm, and when a paralegal position opened up, they hired her. Her starting salary blew mine out of the water. With both our incomes, we could finally afford a place. We found this tiny apartment in Forest Hills, dirt cheap because it was a mile from the nearest subway. We signed the lease on the spot. On moving day, I proposed with a ring that nearly maxed out my credit card. But from the look on her face, you'd have thought it was a diamond straight out of Tiffany's. The first few years were great. Money was tight, but we made it work. I drifted from my old roommates, but made new friends at work. It felt like my college crew all over again. Glenda, though, stayed close to her old friends, but didn't really click with her coworkers. Her law firm was stiff, but it was a solid career move, and she was eliminating it. She crushed every assignment, climbed the ladder fast, and took on tougher cases. That meant longer hours. She thrived under the pressure, and I was genuinely proud of her. But somewhere along the way, we drifted apart. Which brings me to tonight. Glenda's sudden, blindsiding exit. I grabbed a 6-pack from the fridge, sank into the couch, and tried to piece together where it all went wrong. I hadn't seen it coming. Sure, the initial spark had dimmed, but that's normal, right? We were busy with work, but wasn't that just part of building a life together? There weren't any big fights, no betrayals, nothing that screamed divorce. Yeah, she got frustrated with money sometimes, but so did I. And weren't we finally getting ahead? She was moving up at her firm, and I was in line for a promotion. So what the hell happened? The more I thought about it and drank, the worse I felt. First came the heartbreak. My marriage was falling apart, and I didn't even know why. I loved her, and it hurt like hell to think she didn't feel the same anymore. Then came the anger. How could she just walk away like that? Didn't she care about how this would wreck me? But once the anger faded, all that was left was this hollow emptiness. I stumbled into bed, still fully dressed, and passed out. The problem with drinking like that? You wake up early and miserable. My bladder forced me out of bed, and the pounding in my head was brutal. My stomach burned, but the hunger gnawed at me too. A reminder that I'd barely touched any food the day before. Grumbling, I dragged myself to the shower, shaved, and tried to brace for whatever the hell came next. I picked up a coffee and a bagel on my way to the subway. At the office, I was the first one in, but no matter how much I tried to concentrate, my mind kept drifting back to Glenda. The uncertainty was driving me insane. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them. Glenda and I had always kept our professional lives separate, but today, that rule was out the window. I knew her lunch schedule by heart and planned my arrival to coincide perfectly. I even splurged on a cab just to make sure I wouldn't miss her. When I stepped into her office building, the receptionist glanced up, unfamiliar with my face. "Hi," I said, offering a casual smile. "I'm Alex Stevenson, Glenda Preston's husband. Thought I'd surprise her for lunch." She hesitated for a moment, but eventually buzzed me through. As I made my way through the maze of cubicles, I ignored the curious stares from her coworkers. I had one mission: find Glenda. When I reached her desk, she was mid-conversation with a colleague. The moment her eyes met mine, her face went pale. "Alex," she hissed under her breath, standing abruptly. "What are you doing here? You can't be here. I'm at work." "I'm here," I shot back, my voice low but firm. "And I'm not leaving until you explain why you walked out on me." Her eyes darted nervously around the office. "Keep your voice down," she whispered harshly. "I told you why." My frustration boiled over. "No, you didn't. You threw some generic excuses at me and expected me to just accept it." By now, people had started to gather, forming a loose circle around us, whispering and watching the scene unfold. I felt the heat of embarrassment rising, but I wasn't about to back down. Glenda, on the other hand, seized the moment. "You want to know why I left?" she suddenly announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Fine, I'll tell you." She straightened up, her eyes locking onto mine with cold precision. "I left because you're a loser," she spat. "You're stuck in some dead-end editing job, just waiting for someone to retire so you can maybe move up. You've let yourself go, Alex. You're boring. That's why I left." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I stood there, stunned, trying to process what I'd just heard. "But you never said anything about this before?" "Well, I'm saying it now," she snapped. "You're pathetic." And then she twisted the knife even deeper. "Oh, and for the record, you're terrible in bed." A collective oof rippled through the crowd. Laughter erupted around me. I clenched my fist, my face burning, but I held myself together. "Well, screw you," I finally muttered. She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Screw you? That's the best you've got? Wow, just proves my point." More laughter followed. Completely humiliated, I turned on my heel and stormed out, their laughter echoing in my ears as I left the building. There was no way I could go back to work after that. I called in sick and headed home. After changing into jeans and a t-shirt, I wandered aimlessly through Flushing Meadows until I found an empty bench near the Unisphere. I sat down, staring blankly at the giant metal globe, my mind racing. Glenda had never said any of that before. Sure, I wasn't climbing some flashy corporate ladder, but I wasn't lazy. Publishing is a slow game. You've got to be patient. And the stuff about our bed life? That was just cruel. If she'd told me she wasn't happy, I would have worked on it. But one thing stuck in my mind. I glanced down at my stomach. Yeah, it was softer than it used to be. Damn. Had I really let myself go? Beer, late-night takeout, bar food, it all added up. Right then and there, I made a decision. I was going to hit the gym and quit drinking. Not for Glenda. I didn't want her back. But I wasn't going to let her be right about me. I pulled out my phone and found a gym near my office. For the next 2 weeks, I worked out religiously after work. Every muscle in my body ached, but not as much as my pride or my heart. No matter how much I tried to act like I didn't care, the truth was I had loved her. You don't just turn that off overnight. My coworkers kept inviting me out for drinks after work, but I kept dodging the invites. I wasn't ready to tell them I'd quit drinking or why. But of course, I couldn't keep it hidden forever. One afternoon, my desk phone rang. It was Candy from reception. "Hey, Alex, you've got someone here asking for you." Puzzled, I got up and walked out to the front. A guy I didn't recognize stood there, holding an envelope, smiling politely. "Alex Stevenson?" "That's me," I replied cautiously. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." And just like that, he walked off. I stared down at the envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. Candy, who'd been through a couple of divorces herself, gave me a sympathetic look. "Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you and Glenda were having problems." I managed a stiff nod and went back to my desk. I'd known this was coming, but holding those divorce papers made it all feel painfully real. The envelope sat unopened on my desk for the rest of the day. Right before quitting time, Marie, one of my closest friends at work, showed up at my desk. "Let's go, Alex," she said, grabbing my arm. "You're coming out with us tonight." I tried to decline, but she wasn't having it. At the bar, they raised their eyebrows when I ordered a soda, but no one said anything at first. Finally, Jacob broke the silence. "Candy told us what happened, man. Spill it." And I did. I hadn't planned on sharing, but once I started talking, everything came pouring out. The whole ugly story, even the humiliating showdown at Glenda's office. "That's messed up," Tommy muttered. "Bet she's hooking up with that Connor guy from her office." I froze. "Connor? What does he have to do with Glenda?" Tommy looked uncomfortable. We saw them together once. It seemed pretty obvious." Marie shot him a warning glare, but I was already locked in. "Together? When?" "Back in March," Marie admitted quietly. "We saw them at a bar. They weren't exactly being discreet." March. She'd told me she was taking night classes in March. I felt like the biggest idiot in the world. "You knew? And you didn't tell me?" Marie reached out, trying to soften the blow. "Alex, we weren't sure. And honestly, they were so obvious we thought you already knew." I stared at her, stunned. "You thought I knew and just didn't care?" I pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. Their voices faded behind me as I walked out of the bar. Getting blindsided by Glenda was one thing, but realizing my friends thought I was too clueless or too pathetic to see it, that was the final punch.
Alex fixed his gaze on me, his expression a mix of confusion and determination. "That's when I decided to wear the Superman costume," he said. I'd been so absorbed in his story, it took a moment to snap back into reporter mode. I knew heartbreak. It stung. But his? It was public, brutal, soul-crushing. I straightened in my chair. "But why the costume, Alex? How do you go from heartbroken to Superman?" He didn't hesitate. "I didn't think I could face work," he admitted. "So I went to the gym the next morning hoping the exercise would help." He gave a small, bitter shake of his head. "It didn't. All I wanted was to disappear, or become someone else." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle before continuing. "On my way to work, I passed this bookstore, you know? One of those old, cluttered places filled with superhero comics and posters." His eyes drifted, as if he could still see it. "Something clicked," he murmured. "As a kid, I loved superheroes. Comics, movies, you name it. I remembered last Halloween dressing up as Batman. It was just a cheap costume, but I felt confident." He tapped the table rhythmically, lost in thought. "But this time, I didn't want to be Batman. I wanted to be Superman, because Superman doesn't get hurt." Leaning in slightly, his voice lowered, almost conspiratorial. "After everything, the idea of being invincible felt necessary. I couldn't handle more pain or humiliation." He let the silence hang for a beat before adding, "I know it sounds crazy, but I didn't care. I just wanted to feel strong, even if it wasn't real." A casual shrug followed. "So, I did it." The room went quiet, the weight of his transformation lingering between us. I decided to shift gears. "Okay," I said, flipping to a fresh page in my notebook. "How'd you get the suit?" For the first time, Alex's face brightened, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "There's this tailor shop between my apartment and the subway," he explained. "It's run by this old seamstress, Golda Mermelstein. I told her what I needed, and she just nodded, took my measurements, and said, "Come back in a week." He chuckled, the memory clearly warming him. And that's how I got my suit. Standing up, he turned slowly, showing off the flawless fit of the imaginary costume. I had to admit, it suited him. Realizing I'd been staring a little too long, I quickly dropped my gaze back to my notes. "Tell me about the first time you wore it," I prompted. He sank back into his chair, thoughtful. "It was a Saturday night, honestly." He let out a short laugh. "Scariest night of my life." A smirk crept across his face. Respect to women who wear tights. But once I got used to it, it felt good. As he walked to the subway that night, people stared but didn't say a word. "In New York," he said with a shrug. "Weird isn't that weird." But things changed on the platform. People edged away from him. The same thing happened on the train. No one sat nearby. "Well, except this little girl," he said, a soft smile playing on his lips. "She was about 6, riding with her mom." She stared for a while, then ran up to me and asked, "Are you Superman?" He chuckled, remembering the mom's panicked expression. I smiled at her and said, "No, I just like dressing up as Superman." Then I asked if she liked dressing up. His eyes softened. She lit up. "Oh yes, I like being a princess."
She twirled like a ballerina. I smiled, asking about her princess costume. Her mom stayed tense, but I saw her relax a little. Around us, passengers smiled. We chatted until my stop. I waved. "Bye-bye, princess," she grinned. "Bye-bye, Superman." As I left, her mom gave me a small, grateful smile. I felt good, better than I had in months. But I wasn't done. That night, I decided to test myself. I headed to a busy bar. At the door, I froze. It was packed. My instincts screamed to turn back, but I reminded myself Superman wouldn't be afraid. So I walked in. People stared, whispered, but the bartender didn't blink. "What'll it be?" he asked. "Soda with lime," I said. No reaction. He poured it like it was nothing. The guy next to me nudged my arm. "You in a movie or something?" "No," I said. "Just trying something different." "Cool," he shrugged. Relieved, I pushed further. "You into superhero movies?" That was all it took. Soon we were deep in a Marvel versus DC debate. Others joined in. I wasn't the weird guy in a cape anymore. I was part of the group. Eventually, a woman asked, laughing, "Can I get a picture with you?" I checked the time. It was late. I'd had so much fun I hadn't noticed. As I left, someone called out, "Good night, Superman." Others joined in. I waved, sweeping my cape dramatically. They laughed and cheered. The subway ride home was uneventful, but stepping into my apartment, I realized it was the first night I hadn't thought about Glenda. After that, I wore the suit almost every weekend. Most people liked it. Some ignored it. A few laughed. But I didn't feel vulnerable anymore. It made me feel stronger.
Alex smiled, and I couldn't help but smile back. I was happy for him, but I sensed there was more beneath the surface. "Okay," I said, closing my notebook. "That's enough for today. Let's get some photos." My editor had arranged for a photographer to shoot Alex in Central Park. It'd give us great backdrops and, hopefully, candid moments with people. We hopped into a cab. The driver kept sneaking glances at Alex's suit. To my surprise, Alex started chatting. Soon they were debating capes. "My father wore a cape back in the old country," the driver said. "They're surprisingly comfortable," Alex replied. I tried not to roll my eyes, but it was kind of charming. By the time we arrived, Alex and the driver were shaking hands like old friends. Interesting. At the park, I planned to pose Alex on a bridge, but the photographer had a better idea. She placed him on a granite ledge with the Dakota building behind. Alex loved it, posing naturally. He looked like he belonged in that suit. Just then, a voice called, "Hey, Superman!" Alex's face lit up. He jumped down and greeted a group of teens, calling some by name. They sat around him, laughing as he told what was clearly a made-up Superman story. Soon, a mom called them home. They waved goodbye, laughing. "Sorry," Alex said, returning. "I've met those kids before. I like kids. I'd love to have a couple someday." His face darkened for a second. I knew he was thinking about Glenda, but the moment passed, and his smile returned. I turned to the photographer. "Got what you needed?" "Oh, yeah," she said. "The shots were great. But is this guy for real?" I shook my head. I wish I knew. I approached Alex. You were great with the kids, but don't people ever make fun of you? Oh, sure, he said, all the time, but I just smile. Doesn't bother me. He gave me a knowing look. Whenever something unpleasant happens, I ask, what would Superman do? I raised an eyebrow. If someone mocked Superman, would he care? No. Their words would bounce off him like bullets. But doesn't the suit isolate you? I asked. He shrugged. Maybe, but if people don't want to talk to me because of the suit, that's fine. I'm just living my life, my way. Seeing my skepticism, he brightened. Hey, are you free tomorrow night? I hesitated. Why? Come with me, see for yourself. I wasn't sure. Come on, he said, grinning. What do you have to lose? It was more than I'd expected, but I knew what my editor would say. And honestly, his enthusiasm was contagious. Okay, I agreed. Alex looked genuinely pleased. Back at my apartment, I told my roommate Terry about the odd interview. She wasn't surprised. Sounds like another psycho, she said. When I mentioned I'd agreed to go out with him the next night, she rolled her eyes. Ella, seriously? Can't you find a normal guy? I laughed it off, but it stung. Terry knew my dating history wasn't great, and she liked playing the protective roommate. Maybe she had a point. The next evening, as my cab dropped me off at the bar, nerves hit. I scanned for Alex, but didn't see him until I heard my name. I turned to find him, fully in his Superman costume, jogging toward me. This'll be fun, he said confidently, grabbing my hand like it was nothing. He led me inside without hesitation. The vibe shifted the moment we walked in. Conversations paused, people stared, whispered, pointed. I felt uneasy, but Alex was cool as ever, leading me to the bar. The bartender grinned. Superman's here! Cheers erupted like Alex was a celebrity. He ordered a white wine for me, a soda for himself, then pulled me toward a crowd. As we moved, people greeted him, shook his hand, and shot curious glances my way. Being with Alex felt like tagging along with a local star. He slid into conversations effortlessly, engaging everyone but never dominating. He listened, asked questions, and even made sure to include me. Alex kept moving, bouncing from group to group like it was second nature. To my surprise, I started having fun. I'd expected to stand back and observe for my article, but instead, I was laughing, chatting, and actually relaxing into the night. Toward the end, a tall blonde pushed through the crowd, eyes locked on Alex. She pointed at me. This your date? Alex grinned at me. I don't know, Ella, are you my date? Blushing, I said, no, just a friend. Good, she purred, running her hand down Alex's costume. Why don't you come back to my place and see if you're really the man of steel? Alex blushed and gently pulled her hand away. Sorry, I'm all business tonight. She frowned. Your loss, superhero, and stormed off. Alex leaned in, smirking. Looks like the locals are restless. Let's call it a night. To my surprise, I realized I felt jealous. As we headed for the door, it happened. A huge drunk guy blocked our path, glaring at Alex. So you're the loser who thinks he's Superman? The room went silent. Two more rough-looking guys flanked him. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone, ready to call emergency. Alex didn't flinch. I'm wearing the Superman costume, he said calmly. But I'm no superhero. The big guy squinted. Then why the hell are you dressed like that? Alex held his gaze. You really want to know? I wouldn't ask if I didn't, the man growled. Alex leaned in slightly. My wife cheated on me and left. I wear this to protect myself. I don't want to be hurt like that again. The big guy stared at him, and then he pulled Alex into a bear hug. Damn, man. My wife did the same crap. He released Alex, clapped him on the shoulder, and said, Take care, all right? Then he stepped aside. As we left, someone called, Good night, Superman! The whole bar joined in. Outside, my legs felt like jelly. Oh my God, Alex, I thought he was going to eliminate you, I whispered. Alex grinned. I thought so too. Then his smile softened. Let's get something to eat. We found a late-night diner, the kind with flickering neon signs and sticky booths. After we ordered, I leaned across the table, lowering my voice. How did you know he'd react like that? I asked. Alex shrugged, casual but unreadable. I didn't. I frowned, trying to make sense of it. Then why say it? He met my gaze, his expression calm but firm. Because Superman wouldn't lie. He'd tell the truth. I shook my head, disbelief creeping into my tone. Yeah, but Superman can't get hurt. That guy could have decked you. Alex's mouth curled into a sad smile, the kind that lingered just a little too long. Maybe. But I was already in pain. What did it matter? I chewed my sandwich in silence, his words sinking deeper than I expected. The costume wasn't just for show, it was his armor. Trying to shake off the heaviness, I decided to steer us somewhere lighter. You're great with people. Ever thought of politics? Alex laughed, the tension easing from his shoulders. Nah, I just like meeting people. I raised an eyebrow, glancing toward the crowded bar at the other end of the diner. How many of those people do you know? None, he said with a grin. Just the bartender. I chuckled, still puzzled by his ease. So how'd you get so good at talking to strangers? He let out a soft laugh, shaking his head like he couldn't believe it himself. Funny, right? I've always been shy. After Glenda left, I didn't want to see anyone, but the costume helped. I just asked myself, what would Superman do? I studied him for a moment. The shy Alex he described didn't match the confident guy I'd seen tonight, the one who owned every room he walked into. Maybe the suit helped you come out of your shell, I said thoughtfully, but there's more to it than that. He nodded, his eyes drifting to the window as if searching for the right words. I've always liked people, he admitted. I just didn't feel comfortable around them. Now I do, and I want them to feel good too. I didn't say anything, but in that moment I realized there was more to Alex than I'd given him credit for. Then, as if on cue, I remembered the blonde at the bar. Does that happen often? I asked, tilting my head toward him. His face flushed slightly. Yeah, a few times. I raised an eyebrow, pushing a little further. Did you go home with any of them? Alex hesitated, his eyes darting to the table before answering. A couple. I bit my lip, debating whether to ask the next question. Curiosity won out. So, how was it? He let out a dry laugh, but there was something hollow underneath it. It was the first time I'd been with anyone since Glenda. But afterward, she said I was faster than a speeding bullet. I couldn't help it. I laughed, nearly choking on my drink. But it got better, he added quickly, his smile fading into something more serious. I just thought Superman would have control. But after a while, the casual stuff didn't feel right. His eyes met mine, and for the first time that night, I saw real pain there, raw and unguarded. I guess I'm old-fashioned, he said quietly. I just wanted one person, the right one. I thought Glenda was it, but I was wrong. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The buzz of the diner felt distant, like we were sitting in a bubble of our own making. Then Alex glanced at the clock on the wall, breaking the spell. Do you need to get home? He asked, his voice softer now. I nodded, realizing how late it was. He walked me to the curb and flagged a cab. The cape definitely helped. The driver noticed us immediately. As the cabbie eyed him curiously, Alex opened the door and helped me inside. Thanks, Ella, he said softly. I know this was for your article, but I really enjoyed tonight. Then he closed the door, and as the cab pulled away, I looked back to see him standing there, watching me go. The cabbie glanced at me in the mirror. Who was that? I smiled. I'm still figuring that out. When I got home, Terry was waiting. The second I walked in, she bombarded me for details. After I finished recounting the night, she gave me a sharp look. So, what do you think of this Alex guy? I hesitated. He's been through a lot. Terry crossed her arms. Yeah, but he's not some stray cat, Ella. You don't need to rescue him. I know, I said, but the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about him. When I sat down to write the article, it was harder than I expected. Describing his bar antics, park visits, and Superman suit was easy enough. But capturing what was inside Alex, that was the challenge. Readers would want to know why a seemingly normal guy would dress as Superman. I reread the article a few times before settling on a headline, Heartbroken Superhero. It felt right, capturing the contradiction that was Alex Stevenson. Once I had that, the words flowed. When I first got the assignment, I thought it was just another quirky piece. But after spending time with Alex, I found myself carefully crafting every word. I didn't want this story buried in the back pages. Submitting it to my editor felt terrifying. An hour later, my phone rang. "Do you have more?" she asked. "What do you mean? It's the right length." "I'm not running it in the city section," she said. "It's going in the Sunday magazine." I froze. The Sunday magazine? That was huge. Longer articles, more attention, and a spot on the website all week. I was stunned. Pleasantly, but still stunned. I pulled up all the material I'd cut and expanded the article, turning it into a full feature. By the end of the day, I had something I was proud of. "It's really good, Ella," my editor said. "You made the deadline for Sunday." I felt like I'd just hit a home run. That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called Alex. "Hey," I said, "check the Sunday Times magazine this weekend." "It's not in the daily paper," he asked, unsure. "Is that good or bad?" "Oh, it's definitely good," I assured him. "You'll see." But after I hung up, doubt crept in. I thought I'd written an honest, respectful piece. But would Alex see it that way? What if an editor twisted it into something mocking? I'd seen that happen, and if it did, Alex would think it was my fault. The more I thought about it, the more I regretted calling him. Reporters are supposed to stay objective, and I was getting too close. But I liked Alex, and if the article made him look bad, I'd feel awful. Still, I reminded myself, I'd probably never see him again. But part of me hoped that wasn't true. When the Times arrived Sunday morning, I grabbed the magazine first. There he was on the cover, Alex standing on that boulder in Central Park, smiling but with a firm expression. The headline read, "Queen Superhero with a Broken Heart." My story made the cover. I flipped through the article, bracing for edits, but as I read, relief washed over me. They hadn't changed much. In fact, they'd kept almost everything. My entire article, word for word. Wow. I sat there in my pajamas, stunned. A cover story was a huge break, the kind of thing you dream about as a reporter. Then another thought hit me. I wanted Alex to read it and tell me he liked it. Where did that come from? Later, Terry read the article and shook her head. "You're doing it again, Elle. This guy's damaged. Don't get hurt." I brushed her off, but her words stuck with me. Monday came, and my phone buzzed nonstop with congratulatory messages from friends and coworkers. But one call didn't come. Alex's. With each passing day, I grew more uneasy. Maybe he didn't like the article. Maybe he felt exposed. Or maybe he just didn't want to talk to me again. I was knee-deep in self-pity when my phone finally rang. It was Alex. "Hey, Ella," he said warmly. "Sorry I didn't call sooner. Things have been crazy. My friends at work can't believe it's me in the Times. Even my mom from Illinois called. No idea how she found out. She thinks I've lost my mind." He laughed. He rambled on about work and friends while I tried to squeeze in a word. Finally, he paused long enough for me to ask, "So, what did you think of the article?" "Oh, that was," he started, but I heard muffled voices in the background. "Hold on," he said, talking to someone else. After a moment, he was back. "That was my boss. I've got to run. But hey, want to have lunch Wednesday? We can talk more then." "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "Great. I'll text you the details." When we hung up, I wished we'd had more time to talk about the article, but at least he wanted to see me again. I caught my reflection in the computer screen. A small smile had crept across my face. On Wednesday, I arrived at the restaurant earlier than planned, but Alex was already there, and wearing the Superman costume. I hadn't expected that. He stood near the bar, deep in conversation with the restaurant owner, like they were old friends. When he spotted me, he shook the man's hand, crossed the room with that unmistakable confidence, and kissed me on the cheek before guiding me to our table. "You won't believe what's been happening," he said, practically vibrating with excitement as we sat down. I raised an eyebrow. "What now?" "My coworkers made me wear the suit to work on Tuesday," he began, shaking his head with a laugh. "I didn't want to. I take my job seriously, but they kept pushing, so I gave in. When my supervisor walked in, I thought I was dead." I leaned forward, intrigued. "What happened?" Alex's eyes sparkled at the memory. She stared at me for a full minute, then just snorted and said, "If it doesn't distract the office, fine." I couldn't believe it. That gave me such a confidence boost. But he wasn't finished. After lunch, I took a big risk. I did something I've wanted to do for a long time. I rested my elbows on the table, drawn in. What kind of risk? His grin widened. I found this incredible manuscript from an unknown writer. Normally we toss unsolicited stuff, but this one, it was amazing. I felt my pulse quicken. "So, what did you do?" I walked right into my boss's office and handed it to her. My jaw practically hit the table. "No way, you didn't." He laughed at my reaction. "Yep," she told me to stop wasting her time, but I said, "Just read the first couple of chapters. If I'm wrong, fire me." I shook my head, trying to process it. The guts that must have taken. I dreamed of doing something like that, but I'd never had the nerve. "You really did that?" I asked, still stunned. "You love your job. That's a huge risk." Alex just grinned, unbothered. "Yeah, but I believed in it. Better to take the risk than live in fear." I exhaled, half in awe, half terrified for him. "So what happened?" He shrugged. "Nothing yet. She's out of town until Friday." I groaned, clutching my chest dramatically. "Now I'm nervous for you." Alex chuckled, but then his voice softened as he reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "That's why I wanted lunch today, to have something pleasant to think about." I felt a blush creep up my neck, but it wasn't unwelcome. His sincerity had a way of disarming me. Before I could respond, he added, "There's another reason I wanted to see you." I tilted my head, curious. "Oh?" "One of the big online booksellers is throwing a party this Saturday," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "I'd love for you to come with me." "You want me to be your date?" I asked, surprised. "Yes," he said simply, "if you're not seeing anyone." "I'm not," I stammered. "And yeah, I'd love to." "Great." He handed me an invitation. "Meet me at 8. I nodded, suddenly at a loss for words. I glanced at my watch. I need to get back to work. Alex signaled for the check, but before it arrived, the restaurant owner came over. "It's not every day we get a superhero for lunch," he said with a smile. "It's on the house." Alex thanked him warmly, and they hugged like old friends. As we headed out, I shook my head in disbelief. That was amazing. I've never seen a restaurant comp lunch like that. "You should hang out with superheroes more often," Alex teased with a wink. Alex walked me back to my office, waving at strangers who greeted him. At the door, he turned to me. "Thanks for the article, and lunch." Before I could reply, he kissed me. Not rushed, not too intimate, just unexpected. I stood there stunned as he walked off. "Don't forget about Saturday," he called, disappearing into the crowd. What just happened? I wondered, dazed, as I went back to my desk. I couldn't focus all afternoon. By Saturday, I was ridiculously nervous getting ready for the cocktail party. "You're acting like it's prom," I thought, but I hadn't even gone to prom. I pulled out my little black dress, paired it with heels higher than I remembered, and checked the mirror. I wished I had more up top, but my legs looked great. That would have to do. Terry came in, circled me, and nodded. "Have fun, but be careful," she said. "Yes, fairy godmother," I joked. "I'll be home by midnight." She shook her head, but I saw a faint smile. The event was at the Waldorf Astoria. I splurged on a cab. No way I was sweating through my dress on the subway. In the lobby, I didn't see Alex until the crowd parted. And there he was, in his full Superman costume. I blinked. I expected a suit or tux, but this was Alex. If he was brave enough to show up like that, I could walk in with him. He rushed over. "You look amazing," he said. Even if it was just polite, it felt nice. We took the elevator to the Empire Room. The second we walked in, heads turned, and whispers spread through the crowd. Soon we were surrounded by people asking questions. It was wild seeing publishing professionals fascinated by a guy in a Superman suit. And, as usual, Alex handled it with ease. But I'd be lying if I didn't wish we had more time alone. I reminded myself that I was partly to blame for his newfound fame. Then 3 people our age came over, laughing and teasing Alex about work. I stepped back, but he surprised me by slipping his arm around my waist. "This is Ella Finn," he said proudly, "my +1, and the reporter who wrote the Times article." I shook hands with Jacob and Tommy, who gave me appreciative once-overs. When I greeted Marie, I caught a flicker of jealousy. I had a feeling she'd hoped to be here with Alex. I felt a little smug. Once the crowd began to drift off, I gently pulled Alex aside, curiosity getting the better of me. "So," I whispered, "what's this big news at work?" A grin spread across his face. "Mrs. Grissom called me into her office. I thought I was getting fired." I blinked, surprised. "Fired? Why would you think that?" "For giving her that manuscript," he said with a shrug. "But she loved it." My eyes widened, and before I could stop myself, I threw my arms around him. "That's amazing! Your risk paid off!" He chuckled, but there was more behind that smile. "And that's not all," he added, his voice lowering just enough to build suspense. "She promoted me and gave me a big raise." I pulled back just enough to see his face, my excitement bubbling over. "Oh my God, congrats!" I exclaimed, hugging him again, tighter this time. But in the middle of our celebration, I felt him stiffen. I pulled back, frowning. "What's wrong?" His jaw tightened as his eyes shifted past me. "That's Glenda," he muttered. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "She's here?" His nod was almost imperceptible. "She's with Connor, the guy she cheated with." I turned and saw her. A stunning blonde in an elegant dress, arm in arm with a smug-looking man in a tux. She was already heading our way. "I can't believe you wore that costume to an event like this," she sneered. "You look ridiculous." Alex crossed his arms, tense but calm. "Why do you care what I wear? You're embarrassing me, and yourself," she snapped. "Sorry to disappoint you," Alex said evenly. "But I'll wear what I want. And for the record, this suit isn't padded." She instinctively touched his arm, then jerked her hand back, realizing what she'd done. Her eyes flicked to me. "You haven't introduced me to your little friend," she said mockingly. "Glenda, meet Ella Finn, the Times reporter who wrote the article about me." Glenda chuckled. Perfect. An editor and a reporter, two losers from dying industries. Before we could respond, she grabbed Connor's arm. "Let's go." Alex took a step as if to follow, his jaw clenched. I grabbed his arm. "Don't. She's not worth it." For a second, I thought he'd pull away. But then he relaxed. "Okay," he sighed. "She just knows how to get to me." He ran a hand through his hair. I thought I was over it, but 2 minutes with her and I feel like crap. I hesitated, then asked, "Do you still have feelings for her?" His eyes widened. "God, no. It's not that. It's just, she's the one who lied and cheated, and somehow I'm the one who feels bad." It was clear he was still hurt, but at least it wasn't about still loving her. I steered the conversation elsewhere. We talked about work, sipped champagne, sparkling water for him, and ate enough appetizers to count as dinner. Later, we even danced. By the end of the night, Alex leaned in. "Ready to go?" I nodded, and he walked me down to the lobby. A cab was waiting. "I can afford this now," he joked, opening the door for me. On the ride home, I thought about the night. I liked Alex. A lot. I admired his resilience and quirky confidence. But seeing how much Glenda still affected him was hard. She still had a grip on him, even if he didn't admit it. What a witch, I thought. I wanted to protect him. Maybe that's why when we reached my building, I asked, "Want to come upstairs?" His face lit up. "Yeah, I'd love to." Inside, I whispered, "We'll have to be quiet. My neighbor's asleep." When I reached for the light, his hand covered mine. Without a word, he scooped me into his arms. "Which one's your bedroom?" he asked. I pointed, and that was that. In the morning, I reached for him, but the bed was empty. Annoyance flared until I saw him reappear in the doorway. Relief flooded me as he climbed back into bed, warm against me. Later, as I made breakfast, Terry wandered in, her hair a mess from sleep. "Alex," I said. "This is my neighbor, Terry. Terry, meet Alex Stevenson." They shook hands. Terry poured herself coffee, eyeing him. "I guess you're not used to seeing someone in a Superman suit," Alex joked. "No," Terry deadpanned. "I'm not used to seeing my neighbor bring home a man." Alex laughed, while I blushed furiously. Sunday was rainy, and with Terry out, I asked Alex to stay. We spent the morning on the couch reading the Sunday Times. I felt warm and content, though a small voice in my head warned me not to get too comfortable. I ignored it. After a while, Alex set down the paper and looked at me. "So, what's the deal with your roommate? She seems older. Are you related?" I laughed. "No, but she acts like my mom sometimes. When my ex kicked me out, she let me move in and's been looking out for me ever since." He nodded thoughtfully, then said, "You know everything about me. How about your story?" I poured myself another cup of coffee, feeling Alex's eyes on me as I started to share. "Not much to tell," I began, stirring absent-mindedly. "I was a tomboy growing up, gained some weight in high school, and boys pretty much ignored me. But I didn't care. I got into writing. By college, I'd slimmed down, but I was still shy, and most guys weren't exactly patient. So I stuck to writing for the college paper and even took a stab at writing a novel." I gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Failed, of course. I had one serious relationship, but he dumped me senior year. Alex listened quietly, his attention steady as I continued. "After graduation, I worked at my hometown paper, built a decent reputation, and eventually landed a job at the Times. When my boyfriend dumped me, Terry took me in." I shrugged, setting down my cup. "And that's my story." We spent the rest of the day together, the hours slipping by effortlessly. By the time evening came, we made love again. It felt different this time, more intimate, more real. When it was over, we lay there in the quiet, until Alex finally sighed and sat up. "I should head home," he murmured. "I've got work tomorrow." Before he left, he leaned down, kissed me softly, and whispered, "I'll call you." I watched him go, the warmth of his words lingering. I hoped he meant it. My last boyfriend had said the same thing and disappeared without a trace. But this felt different. This weekend had been the best I'd had in a long time, and I wasn't ready for it to end. Later that evening, Terry came home. The second she walked through the door, she gave me a knowing look. "Well," she said, smirking, "he's definitely getting attention." I stayed quiet, but that only made her raise an eyebrow. "You really like him, don't you?" she pressed. "I've never seen you act like this with a guy." I hesitated, then admitted, "He's special, but I've got doubts. I'm happy, but I'm scared too." Terry sighed, her tone softening. "If he hurts you, I'll put a hit out on him." I laughed, appreciating her fierce loyalty more than I let on. As she walked toward her room, she tossed a grin over her shoulder. "Oh, and next time, light an air freshener." She scrunched up her nose dramatically. "It stinks in here." I felt my cheeks flush, the weekend's memories still fresh in my mind. Monday night, I'd barely stepped through the door when the phone rang. I snatched it up, my heart skipping a beat when I heard Alex's voice on the other end, his excitement practically crackling through the line. "Ella, you won't believe it," he burst out. "CBS called. I'm going to be on the Letterman show tomorrow night." I blinked, stunned. Alex was a huge Letterman fan. I could hear the disbelief in his voice, like he still couldn't wrap his head around it. "Wait, seriously?" I laughed, his enthusiasm contagious. But then a thought crept in, and I hesitated. "Is that okay with your boss?" I asked, suddenly worried this might cause trouble at work. "No problem," he assured me quickly. "It's great publicity for them." I promised I'd watch, but after I hung up, mixed feelings crept in. I was thrilled for Alex, and it meant something that he'd called me first. But a nagging voice whispered, "Do you like Alex or just the man in the suit?" I realized I'd never really seen him without the suit, except in bed. Was it just a quirky costume or a crutch? I tried to shake the doubts, but they lingered. Tuesday night, Terry and I settled in to watch The Letterman Show. David's first guest was a young pop singer, and after her performance, she joined him on the couch. After the break, David grinned at the camera. "Everyone in New York is talking about the city's newest hero, Superman." The audience cheered as Alex stepped onto the stage, waving before shaking hands with David and the singer. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't embarrass himself. But he didn't. Despite his admiration for Letterman, Alex was calm and confident. He shared how he started wearing the suit and told the story about the biker at the bar. The audience loved him. His self-deprecating humor had them charmed. Even Letterman seemed impressed. But the pop star couldn't resist flirting. She stroked Alex's bicep, giggling about him being a man of steel. "Show us your superpower," she teased, even as Alex tried to deflect. Finally, after her third attempt, Alex winked at Letterman, stood up, and scooped her into his arms. He spun her around, revealing her underwear to the hysterical audience. When he set her down, she gasped, "Oh my God, that was amazing!" The crowd roared. Letterman laughed, shouting, "Ladies and gentlemen, Superman!" as the audience gave a standing ovation. Terry turned to me, wide-eyed. "That was impressive. Are you sure he's never been on TV before?" "I don't think so," I said, amazed by how well he handled it. I started to believe the suit really was magic. The next day, I checked online reviews. Alex's appearance was getting rave reactions. I tried calling to congratulate him, but his line was busy. I left a voicemail. He didn't call back until the afternoon. "Sorry I didn't call sooner," he said, still buzzing with excitement. "My phone's been ringing all day." Then his tone shifted. "I got a call from William Morris. They want to represent me. They think I've got showbiz potential." "Wow, that's incredible," I said, forcing enthusiasm. "What did you tell them?" "I said I'd think about it. I'd have to quit my job, but they think I could get more TV spots, maybe even a movie deal." The voice in my head was screaming, but I stayed supportive. "I'm so happy for you. Everything's working out." "I know," he said, though he sounded thoughtful. "But I don't want to rush. I've made that mistake before, with Glenda." I offered to help however I could, but another call came in, and he had to go. "I'll talk to you tomorrow," he promised. That evening, I felt off. I was thrilled for Alex, but I couldn't stop thinking about what it meant for us. What kind of future could we have if he was always on the road, or moving to Hollywood? I felt like he cared about me, but what if I was just another footnote in his story? Terry noticed my mood. "What's going on?" she asked. I poured out all my worries. She listened, then crossed her arms. "The real problem is that Glenda woman. She's his kryptonite. He can't stop wearing that suit because she's still hurting him." She paused. "Want me to put a contract on her?" I laughed, grateful for the distraction. 2 days later, at work, a coworker passed by. "Hey, Ella, aren't you the one dating Superman?" I blushed. "We've met." He grinned. "Check Gawker. There's an article about him." I pulled up the site. Under the headline, "Woman Who Broke Superman's Heart," there was a photo of a woman angrily pacing the street, dodging cameras. It was Glenda. The article spilled all the details of her affair with Connor James. Someone had clearly leaked the story. I tried calling Alex but couldn't get through. When he didn't call back that night, my anxiety grew. I felt like something had shifted between us. Maybe it was just me, but I sensed distance growing. At the Times, we're supposed to keep tabs on what other outlets are publishing, even ones we pretend aren't competition. Flipping through the daily news, a headline caught my eye. "Ex-Superman got the axe." Curious, I read on. The article reported Glenda had been fired from her law firm, along with Connor James. Their affair had embarrassed the firm. I remembered how Glenda treated me at the party and felt a sense of justice. Finally, I thought, karma did its job. When I called Alex, I was surprised he answered. "I saw the article in the Daily News," I started, but he cut me off. "Yeah," he said flatly. "Glenda called me about it." "She did?" I asked, shocked. "Yep, she accused me of leaking it. Even when I pointed out things I couldn't have known, she didn't believe me." "So, how do you feel about it?" I asked. "I'm still processing," he admitted. "It's all happened so fast." After a pause, he added, "Ella, this week's been crazy. I need to talk. Can we meet Saturday at the Central Park Zoo?" "Of course," I said quickly. We set a time, and he hung up. At first, I felt hopeful, but doubts crept in. That night, I shared my worries with Terry. "I don't want you to get hurt," she said. "But think about it. He probably wants to do his Superman act with kids at the zoo. Maybe even has media there." My heart sank. Maybe this wasn't about us at all. I almost didn't go, but Terry insisted. At least hear him out. I took the F train to the zoo, expecting to see Alex in his Superman suit surrounded by kids, but he was nowhere in sight. I found a bench by the sea lion pool, Then I saw a man in jeans and a t-shirt walking toward me. I barely recognized him. "Alex?" I asked, surprised. Without the suit, he looked normal. And honestly, handsome. As we walked through the zoo, I muttered, "I don't think I've ever seen you without the Superman costume." "Are you disappointed?" he asked softly. "No," I said quickly, "just surprised." "That's what I wanted to talk about," he said, leading me to a bench. After a long silence, I asked, "Why aren't you wearing the suit?" He looked at me, his eyes suddenly serious, the playful glint I'd grown used to fading. "I started wearing it after Glenda left," he said quietly. "It made me feel strong, less vulnerable. Then I got promoted, went on Letterman, and now Hollywood's calling." Before I could respond, he reached across the table and took my hand, his touch warm, but his expression conflicted. "But the best thing that's happened is meeting you." My heart soared at his words, until he added, almost in a whisper, "But I think I'm going to disappoint you." A knot tightened in my chest. "I don't understand," I said softly, searching his face for answers. He let out a slow breath. "I wore the suit to protect myself. But now that Glenda's been exposed, I don't need it anymore." Part of me felt relieved that he was healing. But beneath that relief, something uneasy stirred. I knew what his words might mean for everything else. "But if you stop wearing it," I asked carefully, "won't you lose all those opportunities?" "Maybe," he shrugged, "but that's not who I am." Then he looked into my eyes. "Would you still want me if I wasn't Superman?" "Oh, Alex," I whispered, throwing my arms around him, kissing him, tears streaming down my face. When we pulled back, he smiled. "So, you're okay with it?" Behind us, the sea lions barked, and we both burst out laughing. As we walked to the subway, I told him how proud I was. "Wearing the suit was a little weird," I teased. "But it got you here, and I'm okay with that." When we got to my apartment, Terry was waiting, arms crossed. But when she saw us together, her face softened. "Looks like it went well," she said, hugging me. Then she turned to Alex. "You better treat her right, Superman." Alex laughed. "I promise." Terry nodded, heading out. But before leaving, she grinned. "Don't forget, the air freshener's in the closet." I blushed, and Alex chuckled, wrapping his arm around me. "She really cares about you." "She's more than a roommate," I smiled. "She's my guardian angel."
After Alex and Ella went inside, I met my friends at a cafe. "Did it work?" one asked. "Yes," I grinned. "I finally got Alex out of that Superman costume. They'll be together a long time." "You've got flair, Terry," another said. I shrugged. At first, I thought he was nuts, but he's a good guy, just hurt by that witch he married. I took a slow sip of my drink, savoring the moment before dropping the bombshell. "Even after the divorce, she still had a hold on him," I said, shaking my head. "So I broke the curse." My friends' eyes widened. "How?" they asked, leaning in. I lowered my voice, letting the suspense build. "My sister works at Glenda's law firm. She gave me the dirt, and I tipped off Gawker." Their mouth dropped open. "You didn't?" I flashed a triumphant grin and winked. "Oh, I did." I set my glass down with a satisfying clink. Once that story broke, Alex was free. They burst out laughing, but I held up a finger, signaling I wasn't finished. "Wait till you hear this," I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a stack of papers. Their laughter faded into curiosity. "What's that?" I laid the papers on the table, my grin widening. "A book contract," I announced. "Ella never believed in herself, so I sent her manuscript to a publisher. They offered her a deal." Their jaws dropped. "Maybe it'll be my wedding gift," I added with a smirk. "I nominate Terry Feldman for Yente of the Year," one said, raising her glass. We toasted, laughing. "You don't need superpowers to make things happen," I said, grinning. "Just a little chutzpah." And with that, we toasted to meddling, matchmaking, and a bit of well-placed mischief.